Are you sick and tired of sounding like a beginner every time you go to strum guitar? If your strumming sounds stiff or robotic, this video is going to fix that. Now, most people think strumming is all about memorizing patterns, but patterns are actually the least important part to getting a good strumming sound on guitar. If you want to sound good strumming, then it's going to come down to things like the accents, the dynamics, and the articulation. In this lesson, you learn 7 powerful strumming techniques, from targeting specific strings to adding groove with muted strums through to controlling tone with things like palm muting and dynamics. This will fix that flat mechanical strumming sound and make it sound way fuller, more expressive, and more musical. And to make things click, I'm going to show you song examples for each technique we look at so you can see these things in action, see how they work, and of course apply them to your own playing. Stick around because it's more than likely one or two of these things you will not have considered before. I'm Simon Candy. I've been teaching guitar for 30 years, and if you want more lessons like this, be sure to hit subscribe. All right. Let's get to it. So our first approach is going to be targeting strings with our strumming. So a lot of the time, beginners will strum where they sort of hit every string of the guitar with every down and up strum, and we get this very heavy sound that isn't very dynamic at all. So by targeting strings, I mean that you don't hit every string of the chord every time you strum it. So generally speaking, with general strumming, if you strum down, you're going to sort of hit the lower part of the chord. It's not a specific amount of strings, it could be 3 or 4 of them, whatever, but it's just sort of the lower part of the chord, if you like, or at least approaching from that way. When you come with the up strum, it's going to be the higher part of the chord. So with a down and an up strum, you kind of cover the range of the chord combined. So let's look at this just on a standard G chord. Okay, 6 strings. So instead of this sort of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 big strums that are just big blocky sounds that don't sound very dynamic, we can target more like so. Right, we're just dispersing the strum over the chord. So let's apply it to a chord progression. So throughout our lesson today, I'm going to use a simple chord progression: G, D, A minor, and C in the key of G here. So if we take this approach, D, A minor, so you can hear sort of targeting those strings. Okay, that's the sort of thing we're talking about. So as far as songs that do this, all of them pretty much do this. This is a very fundamental approach to strumming where we just target the strings. So if we have something like Time of Your Life, Green Day, you hear that. Targeting of the strings, the downs and the ups. Okay, or perhaps Horse with No Name by America. Targeting the strings. Okay, that sort of thing. Now, targeting strings is great, but that's just one aspect to our strumming. There's also the intensity at which you strum. So sometimes you can be very minimal with your strumming, maybe a couple of strums per bar or even a single strum for a bar. And other times you're going to be much more dense by filling the whole bar. Okay, so you've got this range, these bookends if you like, of the very minimal strumming through to heavy dense strumming and everything in between. So if we just take our chord progression, okay, of G to D to A minor to C that we've got. Let's say we're playing very sparse. It might be something like that sort of thing, right? Not having to fill out all the space with strumming, just letting the chords ring out. So this is something to keep in mind because you will need to do that at times when you're strumming. If we were being more dense with that, the sort of the other end of the scale, then it would be more sort of right, we're really filling out the sound with our strumming. Still some targeting of strings from before. So a good example of this would be Free Falling by Tom Petty. So the song starts out pretty sparse as far as strumming is concerned. Something like this. Right? But as the song builds, you start to strum more, particularly in the chorus. Something like this. And then you might later on return to this sort of more sparse strumming. So it can kind of kick things up a level or bring things back down when you're looking at sparse versus dense strumming. Now, controlling the density of your strumming, as we just did, is great, but there's another aspect that will bring more shape to your strumming, and that is bass note picking, essentially. So what this means is we simply play the bass note, typically the root note of the chord, separately, and then strum. Something like this. If I'm just on my G chord, so on that first beat, I'm just literally hitting the low G on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. If I sort of hit 2 strings there, that's fine. It doesn't have to be super precise, but you're basically aiming for the lower note and then strumming. Okay, and it could be on the 1 beat or the 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be on different beats, but the thing is you're getting light and shade by targeting the lower note of the chord and then strumming. So this is similar to the targeting strings, because essentially that's what we're doing here, but it's a little more, less even, if you like. We're just hitting a single note, then strumming. So there's more contrast, is probably the word I'm looking for, between the two parts, by hitting a single note and then strumming. So on our G chord, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we take that to our chord progression, 1, 2, 3, 4, D, A minor and C, right? So the G note with the G chord, D with D, A with A minor, and the C, right? It just helps the bass stand out a little bit more. It's very simple, but it's really effective. So a good example of this would be Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynyrd. So we're doing something like this. Right, I'm just targeting the D, the C for the C, and the G. So if you're just strumming that song, that's basically what you want to do. Okay, there's other bits and pieces going on, but that's the essence, that's the feel of that song. So another example of this would be Hey There Delilah by the Plain White T's. So it does something like this. Right, we're on our D, the D note, F sharp, I think it goes B minor, G, A, B minor, something like that. Okay, so with each of those chords, we're just hitting the root note to the F sharp, just targeting that on each beat. Actually, it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. So it's more frequent than what it was with Sweet Home Alabama. So now you've got extra shape that you can add to your strumming. There's also another approach here that makes a difference, and that is where you strum along the length of the string. So generally, most of your strumming is going to be over the sound hole, where it naturally falls your hand when you strum. However, if you strum closer to the bridge and the saddle, you get a much twangier sound, and we can take advantage of that, even if just very minimally. Also, on the other end of the spectrum, if we sort of strum a little bit more over the neck, over the fretboard here, just sort of the higher region of the fretboard, it's got a little bit of a warmer sound. So you go from twangy to a much warmer sound, and then in between. You might not hear a huge difference from here to here, but it all makes a difference. That's the point. If I was strumming through just a G chord, let's say, I can strum here, but I might sort of put a couple of strums over towards the bridge, or I could be strumming over here, and it might just be the odd strum that I put in there just for a little bit of contrast, right? So you don't have to overdo it. I'm not saying you've got to sit there strumming like this a whole song. It might sound a little strange. So we could do that in our progression, sort of this, not everywhere, but just wherever you want. Okay, it's just more tonal elements, things that you can play around with that contribute to the sound of your strumming. Now, a great song that comes to mind that does this sort of thing is Breathe by Pink Floyd. So in the opening of that song, you hear this E minor add 9 chord, and you hear this. And it's strumming towards the bridge, right near the bridge to get that twangy sound. And it's also an up strum, and we're sort of dragging our pick across the strings, just to kind of really emphasize it. So you get this, and then it's like an A suspended, and again, and back to the A, right? That sort of thing. This next approach adds a little bit more variation in the sound of your strumming, and that's kind of mixing strumming in with some single notes. We can be minimal with it. So if I grab my G chord, you're strumming, but you're picking out the odd note, right? I'm picking out just the top string there as I strum, and maybe a couple of other notes. Just a couple of notes amongst your strumming, right? That sort of thing. So that approach was a little bit of picking with strumming. We can also do a little bit of strumming with picking, still mixing the two ideas together. So you might have a pattern that goes, and then you're sort of strumming, this sort of thing. Okay, as opposed to strumming with a little bit of picking. Okay, both those approaches are great. We're mixing strumming with picking. So if we took that to our chord progression that we're using here today, something like this. So just picking out some notes, or picking with a bit of strumming. Okay, so a good example of this would be Knockin' on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan. It's actually a very similar progression, almost the same as the one we're using throughout our video today. But let me do an example of that with mainly strumming, but picking out a few notes here and there, something like this. That sort of thing. You could do it a little bit more picking with a little bit of strumming. This sort of thing. So lots of different things that you can do. Our next approach is using pick with fingers, a hybrid approach, right? Where we use the pick and our fingers when we strum. A lot of the time, I do this very, very often, I will combine, sort of mix together strumming with the pick along with the back of the nail of my fingers, typically my middle and ring fingers of the picking hand. So I might go, so I'm pick, fingers, just getting a couple of strums with the fingers in there instead of the pick. You don't have to do this, but I do it quite a bit. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I just don't know when I started doing this, but I like the sound of the back of my nail. It's a different sort of tone to the pick. No, it's not better or worse, it's just different. And sometimes the pick's quite a sharp sort of sound. And I just like sort of bringing in the strum with the back of the nails of my fingers. So that's what I'm doing there on the G chord. The other thing is you can pick out single notes with your fingers. So you're picking a pattern like you would with the plectrum, right? But we are picking with some fingers as well. So it means that you're not having to move to every string with the pick. Fingers are there, so the pick's not having to travel as far, so it's quite efficient, but it's the sound of the fingers versus, see, that's a sharper sound than, you can hear quite a difference in the tone or the timbre of the strings there in the G chord. So that makes a big difference. So a good example of this approach where you could use it would be Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. So you got this sort of thing. Right, so what I'm doing is I'm using my fingers there when I play that little embellishment on top. And then So my pick is really just playing the root notes of the chord. And then we've got little 10th harmony there, so pick with fingers. Now, if you want more of a punchy driving sound with your strumming, this is where palm muting comes in. It's a really, really important part to guitar playing as far as dynamics are concerned, especially with strumming. So we can apply a very heavy sort of palm mute, and the palm mute is achieved by using the palm of your hand resting right on the saddle of the bridge. This is the white strip you see here on the bridge of my guitar. I've got to lay that side of the palm of the hand right where the string crosses the saddle there, and I'll cover, because of the angle of my hand, I'll cover probably the lower 2 or 3, which is all I need, okay, to cover. And if it's right on that spot, you'll get a really nice groove, that sort of thud, if you like. If I'm off of the bridge, it just becomes this scratchy sound. So it's a very specific spot. Your hand's not really on any other angle than what it is when it's up here strumming. It's just grounded down, just anchored down to that spot on the bridge. So if we take that palm muting to our G chord and we apply just a heavy palm mute across the whole thing, it sounds like this. So you're basically palm muting everything, and because we're palm muting, we want to pick everything downward, okay, not just on the beat but also off the beat. When your palm mute is going to be with your down strums, not your up. Or we can apply it a little bit more sparingly, and just on some of our down strums we'll do this where we palm mute. So you're just sort of bringing your hand down onto that spot of the guitar as your pick hits the strings, and you can kind of, you know, weave that into your strumming, something like this. Okay, so there's some palm muting going on there, but there's also some of these ups that aren't being palm muted. It's not just alternating, it's just kind of mixed in there a little bit to provide that groove. A good example of a song that does this would be Horse with No Name. Let's come back to that one, because often when I'm strumming that, particularly in the verses, I'll put a little bit of a palm mute on it. So something like... that sort of thing. And then when you get to the chorus, you might be more, you know, letting it ring through so you can hear the contrast there. So quite often I'll lock into a bit of a groove with that. Another one that is a good example is Summer of '69, Bryan Adams. So you've got this sort of on the D and on the A. And it's kind of doing this all down strums, it's palm muting, but it's certain parts. So if we come back to the D chord, certain parts, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. So the 1 and the and being accented because they're not palm muted, and everything else in between is. And then as you palm mute in that second bar, you sort of lift it gradually to build it back up to that hit on the 1. So it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now, speaking about bringing drive and groove to your strumming, there's another approach that can really add a percussiveness to your strumming, if you like, which is this sort of muted strum. Different to palm muting, not palm muting here on the bridge, but just literally hitting the strings like this, so that you get this percussive hit that might emulate something like a hi-hat on a drum kit or a snare. Okay, and it's really what you want to do when you strum is you want to come down, and when you do that particular strum, you're not going to follow through. You really just want to get the sound. So you're just hitting the strings abruptly and just relaxing the hand after doing that. That's what you're doing. And typically you'll do this on beats 2 and 4, because that's where you kind of hear like a snare hit, for example. If we just look at this technique in isolation, let's grab the G chord, we might go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, this sort of thing. So if we did that to our progression, sort of thing, right? Just hitting on 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 2 and 3 and 4. So a good example of this in a song is Proud Mary by Creedence Clearwater Revival. So you've got the hit 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3, And then as it gets into the song, and it's just on that D chord for however many bars we're on the D, it's doing the hit, always on 2 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now the last approach here is embellishments. So this really decorates the chords you play. Instead of just sitting on static chords all the time, we can create movement inside those chords before moving to the next chord of the progression. So some classic ones, like on the D, we can suspend it and resolve it back, or we can take the second finger off and make it a suspended 2 chord and resolve it back. The G chord, we can do the same sort of thing, but for G, you typically are going to want to fret it a little differently to free up some fingers. I've got my 3rd and 4th fingers here. I block out the 5th string because I don't have the note of the chord on that string, so I don't want to hear it. If I do that with just 3 and 4, I've got a big sounding G chord and fingers that are free to add these little embellishments. Right, this sort of thing. So you can do it on all chords, the C chord. So let's take that to our chord progression. So we might strum out on G, little suspended on D, taking off the 1st finger there to get an A suspended 2 chord, C, maybe on the C, I hammer on. The common thing is to take the 2nd finger on a C chord, take it off, and hammer it back down. This sort of thing, right? So we could go back to our progression. A minor, that sort of thing, just subtle little movement. Okay, all those sorts of things. I'm just making that up there, that you can put them in anywhere you want, even if they're not in the actual song, they will work really, really nicely. So some examples of songs that do this. So think Patience, Guns N' Roses. We have this sort of G, the A, that sort of thing, right? It's not exactly what's going on, but it's that type of thing. You hear all this movement across otherwise what would be very static chord movement. So another great example of this would be Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. So this is 6/8 time, and for the first part of the song, it's just on a D chord. So like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But there's a line being played there using little, embellishments and so forth. So it goes something like this. If you like this lesson, then you'll love my free 5-day acoustic guitar rhythm techniques mini course. In it, you learn 5 powerful ways to sound more polished and more pro as a rhythm guitarist, including dynamic strumming and chordal picking techniques, rhythm riffs and fills, as well as expressive chord embellishments. Across 5 short lessons, you not only learn these techniques, but how to put them together to create great sounding rhythm parts that really stand out. So click the link in the description below to get instant access and start transforming the way you play rhythm guitar today. If you like this lesson, then hit subscribe and ring the bell. That way you won't miss the next one. And if you want to continue developing your rhythm guitar skills, check out the video on your screen right now, where I show you how to connect the chords of a progression with some very tasty rhythm licks and fills. I'm Simon Candy. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.